about habits of highly effective technical manager. So not just any manager, but you're interested in managing a team of technical developers. You might be a manager already. You might be aspiring to be a manager sooner than later. What are the things you can do in order to be effective in managing a team of developers who are extremely skilled, highly technical, but how can we really be effective in doing so? So what I want to share with you today is some of the experiences I've faced over the past few decades. And these are the things I've learned from observing good managers and observing terrible managers. I'm not a manager. I would probably never be a manager. And my desires are very different from the desires of others. And that's what makes this world really beautiful, that we all have different objectives. But I've worked effectively with a lot of managers from organizations that I consult with and organizations that I worked with as an employee in the past as well. And over the time, I've taken a look at things that people have done that has given really good results, or things they have done that really did not help really the team in a large sense. So I want to spend a few minutes on some of these things that we can think about and how we can be effective. And I want to talk about 12 practices. And I'm going to count down towards those 12 practices from how we can be effective. So let's get started with the 12th practice here. And the first one I want to talk about is be adaptive, not reactive. Now, when you are a manager of a team, you're responsible for the team's performance, but you're also responsible to deliver the results for the organization that you work in. So there's a lot of often pressure on, can you deliver what is expected? Now, unfortunately, though, one of the things that really hurt us a lot is when emotions kick in. And when we become really emotional, then we lose sense of reality. And when we lose sense of reality, then we are rushing towards doing things, and invariably things only become really worse. So the times I've seen things to be very effective is when managers don't give to pressure, don't give to emotion, but are extremely realistic. So we work in the field of software development, and software development is different from a lot of other fields where things are maybe a lot more defined, a lot more easier to predict what we do. But in software development, it's not the case. So I'm a big fan of metaphors. I'm a big fan of analogies. And years ago, I was writing a book called Practices of an Agile Developer. And I wanted to really start the book by describing how does it feel to develop software. And I was searching for different metaphors and what would it be to a good analogy. And then eventually what I settled down on is surfing. If you think about software development is a lot like surfing. Because any surfers in the room? Okay, there's one person, so I can say anything I want. Otherwise, if you promise to keep quiet. And maybe you can validate this. As a surfer, you don't go surfing saying, I clearly know what the situation is going to be today. The situation is extremely unpredictable. And also, surfing in one area doesn't mean you know how to surf in a different area. So the locale makes a difference. The weather makes a difference. So many factors can make a difference. Well, that's kind of what the life of a programmer is. When we develop software, it's very unpredictable to what we want to be developing and how it's going to turn out. So software development to me is a lot like surfing in terms of how it feels. And that's exactly what I kind of wanted to bring out as a metaphor when I was writing this book called The Practice of an Agile Developer, is to start out by saying we need to really rethink about how we develop software, because software is not a predictive manufacturing. Software has its own challenges. But in terms of how projects are often managed, I'll mention probably one of the most unpopular tweet I ever made. I have a flaw in myself that it doesn't matter what I'm doing and where I am, there's a separate thread in my mind that always keeps thinking about software development because I just love developing software. And I was on a vacation with my family. At that time, my children, who were much younger than they are now, were sitting next to me. We were having lunch, and as we were having a good time having lunch, a little thread in my mind was thinking about something, and so I pulled my phone out and I started typing, and my son, who was sitting next to me, leaned over and looked at what I was typing, and immediately he screamed saying, "Oh my gosh, Dad, no, please don't tweet that." And of course, as a parent, one of the key responsibilities you carry is to always do things that embarrass your children. And especially if your children tell you not to do it, you absolutely have to do it. So as he was screaming through his lungs, "No, Dad, please don't type those things. That's not right." And I hit the button, and he's like, "Oh my gosh, Mom, I cannot believe what he just said." And so all the three of them are looking at it and staring at me. And to everybody's surprise, it started getting retweeted and retweeted thousands of times within a minute, and they are much more shocked about this. So the tweet I posted was this: "I've set a wedding date. I've not asked her out yet. How software projects are managed." So if you really think about it, imagine this for a minute. You have this guy who walks into a restaurant, sees this young lady sitting alone, goes to her and says, "Honey, we're going to get married in June. We're going to have 3 children, 2 girls and 1 boy. Here's where they're going to go to school. Here's where we're going to live." And she's in a shock and says, "Who the hell are you?" That is the guy. Because in projects, what do? We set the deadline first. Then we set the scope afterwards. Then we tell everything about it. And then they say, "By the way, we are agile." What is there to be agile when you have set everything up already? So this is one of the fundamental flaws of what we do in our field, is we are completely detached from the reality. Now, in life, you would never accept anybody who behaves in a stupid way like this. And you need to really take the time to get to know a person, and wedding comes much later. But in software development, we tend to be unrealistic. It's the hypocrisy of the industry we live in, where we are rushing towards the deadlines, rushing to define the scope, and not really enjoying the benefits of really giving that opportunity to really understand and evolve what we are building. So an effective manager should really become more realistic and say, "No, I don't want to be driven by that madness of the deadlines we set unrealistically when we know the least about what we are developing." So we need to really understand what we are developing before we can come close to setting the date of when we can actually deliver the software. That becomes extremely important. So the question I want to ask you is, what is agile development? So to me, agile development is really feedback-driven development. That's what agile development really is. It's not Scrum. It's not stand-up meetings. It's not the 20 other things we have come to do. And this is one of the beautiful things in the world. We as humans love rituals. You go to any company, we are agile. I always tell them, "So glad we got that out of the way. Now let's talk about what you do." Because what do they actually do? We are agile, we do Scrum, we do stand-up meetings. Stand-up meetings are really nice. We can stand around and keep talking about stuff instead of doing the real work. So the point really is, we love rituals. The reason we love rituals is, rituals gives us relief from reality. There's a fire going on. Don't worry about it. Let's practice this ritual right now. So rituals are great, right? Because that way we don't have to do the real stuff. And by the way, when I go to companies, the worst thing I've ever heard, and I always really feel sorry when I hear that, I go to somebody and say, "Oh, by the way, I want you to know I'm the Scrum Master." I'm like, really sorry to hear that, right? Why do you need a Scrum Master? This is the beauty of it. Very clever people. They found out they can create a position where they can get paid and do absolutely nothing, right? These are geniuses in the world, right? So if you don't want to do anything, your title is Scrum Master. This was not supposed to be a job. This was not supposed to be anything. And they just invented this position, and I'm a Scrum Master, right? It just boils my blood when I hear about it. So let's come back to the reality. Agile development is feedback-driven development. You want to develop something, you want people to start using it, you get the feedback on whether it is relevant to what they are using, and then you go back and improve on what you built, and you keep building on it, and that's basically the idea behind agile development, is it's feedback-driven development. In fact, what is one of the most important things in agile development? I go to a company, a client of mine, and they said, here is the plan. And I said, whoa, that's the plan. Yep, that's the plan. We have laid it out. Well, I'm sorry, that is not agile development if you created the plan and you just left it there to dry. So the planning is so important in agile development. We do it every single day. And this is what we call as adaptive planning. So adaptive planning is extremely important. And look at the word plan for a minute. The word plan is a very interesting word because it is both a noun and a verb at the same time. The plan as a verb is the act of planning. The plan as a noun is what you created. As a verb, it's very useful. As a noun, it's totally useless because the minute you created the plan, it is obsolete. So if you depend on what becomes obsolete, you're going to be wrong. So this is where we need to understand the difference between creating a plan versus the act of planning that we do. And as Eisenhower said, plans are nothing, but planning is everything. He here uses the word noun. The plans are nothing. Because the minute you create a plan, that's obsolete because the reality has changed. And now if you act upon the plan you created, you fail because it no longer is relevant to the realities of where you are. So you create a plan, but you keep planning ahead. This is what we call as adaptive planning in agile development is we constantly keep asking, how are we doing? Are we still going to be there? What are the changes we need to make to be able to be effective in delivering what we want to deliver? And you keep adapting your plan. So be realistic. So planning is so important. We do it continuously, and we call that adaptive planning in agile development. So as an effective manager, you want to be realistic. That is the first thing I ask managers. You don't have to be smart. You just have to be realistic. You drop your ego, you drop your emotion and say, things change. Let's adapt to what the realities are. You come out winning when you do. If you hold on to, I always tell people, where do you live? And people will tell you which state they live in. I live in the US. And I always tell people there are 51 states in the US. And people look at me, it's like 51 states. The last time I checked, we only had 50 states. There's actually 51 states. And most of US lives in one state. That's called the state of denial. Because we are like, no. My reality is different from everybody else's reality, right? So we live in a state of denial constantly, disjoined from the realities of the world. And we need to really become realistic and say, it doesn't matter what I want. What matters is what can I deliver? And we need to really realign to that. That becomes very important. The next thing I will encourage you to think about is, I'm a big fan of using carrots rather than stick. Now, I'll give you an example of this. I had a client in Dallas call me up and said, my team is really a disaster. They don't know to deliver software. Come help me. So I go there, I start working with the team. And the team is genuinely good people who don't have a clue how to do things. But I'm working with them, trying to really help them. And one day the manager calls me into the room and says, hey, I really don't like the way things are being done. I want to deliver more. I want to get more out of this team. And I said, well, you cannot just get more out of the team just because you want to get more out of the team. By the way, this wasn't down in Texas. So it's no surprise he came with this analogy. He said, Venkat, if I put a gun to your head and tell you to run faster, what would you do? And I don't think he was kind of kidding when he said that, right? In the middle of Texas. And I told him, with all respect, if you put a gun to my head and tell me to run faster, my thought is not on how to run faster. It's to find out a way to take the damn gun away from you and shoot you back. So the point really is, we tend to really think about not motivating the team, but we are misguided oftentimes. So it doesn't help to bring adversary to the team's behavior and performance, but instead ask the question, why are they not able to deliver? What can I do to make them more effective? So I'm going to say some use, actually I would say most use TDD extensively. We all know what TDD is, right? What is it? No, it is called a threat-driven development, right? So we're like, you do this, right? And so we all practice TDD. This is the most practiced, thing in the industry is the TDD that we practice. So yeah, it doesn't help to threaten people like that. It's like, if you don't deliver this, you're in trouble, or no bonus for you, or whatever the consequence could be, right? But instead, what if we can motivate people rather than threaten them? Rather than coming to work with a stick, what if we come to work with a carrot? And I'm a big fan of carrots because you feel empowered, you feel motivated, and even others are not around you, you want to keep moving forward because you're empowered and motivated. If it's a stick, you're going to only try to avoid the beating from the stick. That's your goal. That's the top of your mind. So don't practice that kind of TDD. That's not very effective. One of the key things to keep in mind is that kind of this picture, this is our life every day. I always say there's a reason why nature gave us two hands. And the reason we have two hands is this one is for you to help pull up the next person up, and this one is for you to be pulled up at the same time. So we are right in the middle, if you will, right? So it's always the two arms where you're pulling somebody up and there's somebody else to pull you up. And we are here together to make that happen. If we have that sense of we are here together as a team, then we view things very differently. And so seek better results through motivation and support. So you are there and help the team and be ready to be helped by the team. And that really makes a big difference. So if the team is not doing really well, don't walk in with the stick, but walk in with the support. You ask the team, what can I do to help you? And they say, you know what? I really don't understand how to write this test case. And yes, the concept exists, but I don't know how to really write the test cases. Well, as a manager, you say, you know what? That's perfectly fine because that's a skill. And if you have not had the time and opportunity to develop the skill, there's no point beating you down on it. But I know Raju in this other team has been practicing TDD. Let me talk to his boss and find out if we can borrow Raju for a few weeks into our team so Raju can work with our team, pair with the developers, and help you to become better at test-driven development. Look at the result you can achieve by bringing in a coach, whether it's internal or external, but somebody who will actually work with the team, show them the ropes so they can be more effective. So bring the support to the team rather than the stick to the team. Then you are able to achieve the results in a much better way throughout the team's efforts. So the next is something I learned the hard way. And I'm humbled by this because sometimes we don't think about this enough. But I was in a job, and I'm going to say match position with personality. So we had a developer in my team. This was about 10 years ago, I'm talking about. We had a developer in my team, and the developer was not really good at all. And I was having a lot of trouble with this developer. And every day was like, my gosh, I got to deal with this person. The quality of what they develop is poor. We got to fix a lot of things they do. So all this is on my mind. So my boss came to me one day, sat down and said, what do you think of this developer? I'm like, oh my gosh, thank you for asking finally. And I'm like, oh, that person is really terrible. They cannot write the code at all. And my boss immediately said, what do you think this person is good at? And for a minute, I was taken aback. And I was like, what? And my boss said, what is this person good at? And I'm like, well, I did not see that question coming because I had written down everything I don't like. And the question my boss asked was, what is that person good at? And I was humbled immediately. And I said, I know you are a better person than I am. Because your question was to look at the positive of that person while I have created a mountain of what was not good. And then I said, well, now that you ask, let me think about it. And I said, this person is really good at this. And my boss said, exactly, that was my impression too. I'm so happy you concur with that. And then my boss said, what if we create a position that involves doing that and send that person over? I was very eager to send the person over, honestly, right? And I said, yeah, that's a great idea. I'm telling you, that person after 10 years is doing extremely well. And every time I think of that person, I'm reminded of how better my boss was than my attitude. And that is one of the things I learned the hard way from this experience. I was so eager to find out how this person is useless for the position that person was in. But my boss was so smart, he was able to see the position that would fit that person rather than fitting the person into a position. That makes a big difference. Don't try to fit the person into the position. Position is short term, the person is long term. You know, people often use the word, life is too short. I'm sorry, I disagree. Life is too long. Because as a professional, you are in a professional life for 50 to 60 years, maybe, 40 to 45 years, depending on how long you work. That's a long time. 40, 50 years is a very long time to work in an industry, and that's not a short term at all. So life is too long to be wasted on wrong things, not too short. So you don't want to fit the person into a position. Instead, find the position that fits the person. That becomes really important. So this is the employee that was struggling at the job a lot, and my boss was looking at the positives of it rather than me looking at the negatives of that. And that was a lesson learned. And I learned this lesson as to how we can really rethink about it. So what are the key strengths of that person? What would be the job that this person would be really, good fit for, rather than trying to fit this person into a job, is a very nice attitude to have. And I wish more managers had that attitude as my boss did. But that also brings up a few other things we can learn from. Results, not presence. And I was in the beginning stages of my consulting career. I was getting invited to go speak in various places. I was traveling constantly, and I was still, doing my work. And I also part-time at the university where I teach in the night as well. So I was taking on a lot of different roles and responsibilities. And as I was traveling around, I got an email from the chair of the department. And the email said, so because I was traveling a lot, I'm a part-time instructor, I never went to campus during the day. And imagine 5, 6, 7, 8 years go, and the department changes, the chairman changes, the dean changes, and you don't go to campus, you don't know who these people are. So one day I got an email from the chair of the department, and the email said, oh, Venkat, we have not really met, but my name is so-and-so, I'm the chair of the department, I would like to meet with you, so please make an appointment. So immediately I texted my wife saying, I just got an email from the chair of the department, he wants to see me, I think I just got fired. Because as a part-time person, why would a chair of the department want to see you unless they want to deliver the bad news to you? And she was so happy. She said, that's great. You will actually come home in the evenings. So thank you. So I kind of went there to the chair and I said, hey, I'm so-and-so. It's like, yeah, I know who you are. We haven't met before. So I want to talk to you about the undergrad program. We want to really make it relevant to the industry, and we want to really make some changes. And I'm like, so it's not about me being fired after all, right? This is actually interesting news, but I'm not going to tell him that. So I just sat down and said, oh, of course, I think that's a great idea for you to think progressively like that. And then I said, if you once you make a change, just tell me what you plan to do. I will throw in all my support. I'll make sure this happens the way you want to. And then he said, well, we found somebody with incredible experience in the industry, and I've decided to hire this person as the director of undergrad studies. Well, usually a director of undergrad studies are old guys with gray beard, with the tenure for the past 20 years, just waiting to die. And so he was like, I've decided to hire a director of undergrad studies. I said, you know what? Not a problem. Once you decide who this person is, just let me know. I'll work with this person, and absolutely I'll be happy to work under the leadership. And he said, well, I've extended the offer. I'm still waiting for this person to take the job. And I said, well, absolutely. Just let me know when it's done. And then he said, well, I'm still waiting for this person to take the job. He's here. He hasn't accepted the job yet. And I kind of looked around and said, I don't understand what you're saying. And he said, well, it's your job if you want it. That's what I'm saying. I said, oh my gosh, thank you. I'm really, honored to do this. But I travel around the world. I'm in different countries every week. And then he said, let me interrupt you. You didn't understand my question, he said. I would never, ever forget these words in my life. He said, you didn't understand my question. I did not ask you, can you come to work? I asked you, can you get the work done? And I said, say that again? And he said, I didn't ask you, can you come to work? I asked you, can you get the work done? I said, you don't have to say anything more. I was the very first director of undergrad studies who was not tenured, but was a lecturer at the university. And I did that for 2 years, working with him, and we created a new undergrad program. But the lesson I learned from him was its attitude to say, I don't care where you are. I care about what you do. I always jokingly say this, by the way. I don't live in Houston. I teach in Houston, but I live in Colorado, in Denver. I've lived in Denver for 18 years. I used to live in Houston for 20 years. I quit from my, from my work at Houston, moved to Colorado because I fell in love with the mountains. And for the past nearly 18 years, I've been teaching remotely of the 33 years I've been teaching. As I always jokingly say, I was remote before the word remote was used. And so work from home was the one I've been doing for nearly 20 years now. But he had that vision to say, I don't care where you are. I care about what you do. And that is something I learned really in an interesting way, is to have that vision about what do you want people to do and not just having to show up to work. That can make a big difference. So focus on the result rather than focusing on being present in a certain work. And that is basically the lesson I learned from that experience is, and over the years, I have worked with people that I've actually never, ever met before. I remember this one experience I would never forget. I wrote the book Practice of an Agile Developer, and I really needed some help. So I said, hey, Dave Thomas, I really need some help. And he said, maybe Andy Hunt can help you with it. So Andy and I co-authored the book together, and it was a journey of a year. We collaborated over the phone and email constantly writing this book. And I was in a conference, and Dave Thomas was sitting there, and I went down and sat down, and I said, hey, Dave, and I just started speaking to him. And suddenly Dave said, oh, Venkat, I just realized you have never met your co-author, Andy, have you? And I said, no. And he's like, well, Venkat, meet Andy, and Andy, meet Venkat. And here's a co-author with whom I've written a book, but I've never seen him before in my life. And we both are like, wow, this is so great to see you in person. And then he's like, so what are you talking about? I'm like, well, incidentally, I'm talking about the topic of the book. And I'm like, do you want to give a joint talk? He's like, yeah, let's do it. So we had 5 minutes to prepare for a joint talk. And what was the preparation? I said, what do you want to do? He said, just go in and start talking. And I just started talking. He would just walk on the stage, and he would just kind of wave at me and talk. And people came to me and said, that's the best joint talk we ever have listened to. I said, yeah, we had less than 5 minutes to prepare. And the point really is, when you're in line with somebody and you have thoughts are really identical, it doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter how far you are. In agile development, people say face-to-face conversation is the best. I call it a nonsense. I call it a nonsense because face-to-face conversation is the best when everything else is equal. I want you to tell me, when was the last time everything else was equal? Almost never. It's the attitude of the person you are working with. It's so many other factors. So if you want to make something work, you can make it work anywhere you want to. If you don't want to make it work, you don't have the right attitude, you could be sitting next to a person and not going to deliver anything. So it really matters what kind of attitude we have. My boss's attitude was, I'm going to focus on your result, not on your presence. And that makes a big difference in what you do. So can you get the work done rather than can you come to work is a huge difference. Work smart, not long and hard. I used to work in a company where my boss, so I'm a workaholic. This is no surprise to anybody that knows me. But there's a big difference between being a workaholic and being at work. I almost always worked, so to say, 9 to 5 on my job. But after the 5 p.m. is when I start my work. I want to write blog posts. I want to write books. I want to write articles. I want to prepare for talks. Where do these things come from? So I would come home and I would start working on my stuff until the next morning I'm ready to go back to work to do the work stuff. So I used to have a boss, and my boss would come on a Saturday at 10 o'clock to work. I can guarantee you I was almost never there on a Saturday. And then on Monday morning at 11 o'clock, he would have a list of people that was at work on Saturday. And during the meeting, he would say, well, I was here on Saturday. Joseph was here. Thank you, Joseph. Sarah was here. Thank you, Sarah. And then he would kind of look at me. You were not here. And I'm like, no worries. That will never happen, right? Because I'm not going to pretend that I want to show up to work and please my boss. I'm going to deliver your results, but I'm going to take care of other things on a Saturday. Being at work is not my responsibility. But that was the culture in the team. And I know what people did on Tuesday at 3 p.m. They didn't work. Why not? Because we're going to be here on Saturday anyway. What's the rush doing it, right? So fast forward, I have taken a new job in a different company. And this was my very first day. So what is on your mind first day? My gosh, you have to impress your bosses, right? You got to impress your colleagues. So I'm sitting and working at my desk, and my boss comes around, and this is like close to 5 o'clock. He comes around, comes into my office, literally sits on my table and says, Venkat, so how's your first day at work? I'm like, oh, thanks for asking. And I'm talking about what I've seen so far, what I've been working on that day. And as I'm speaking about these things, he quietly leans over and turns off my monitor. And I'm like, he just turned off the monitor. That's kind of weird. And I looked at the monitor, I looked at him, and I was like puzzled, like, you turned off my monitor. And then he looked at me and said, Venkat, I'll guarantee you something. Nobody will do that work for you. It will be there for you when you come in the morning. Let's go. I'm like, what? And he's like, let's go. It's time to go home. It's 5 o'clock. Why are we here? It's time to go home to the family. And I was like, maybe this is a test, right? Maybe he's trying to really see how I react. Here's what I found. I worked with the team for 3 years. We delivered more software and better code as part of the team than in my previous job. You know why? Because 10 a.m. on Monday, everybody is like, let's talk about how this works. Hey, did you watch the game yesterday? Let's talk about during lunch. Let's talk about the design right now. Because they know they're going to leave at 5 o'clock. They were razor sharp focused, and that makes a huge difference. So work smart, not long and hard. So when people tell me, you know how hard I worked? I say with respect, I don't care. That's your problem. I don't care about how hard you worked. I care about the results you produce. If you can work less and produce the same result, that's even better, right? Because we are not here to show that we can work harder. We're here to deliver the results. That's what we want to do. So who worked in this weekend was the job I once worked in, not a job I want to be in. That's not the good environment to work in. It's a culture, and we need to think about what kind of culture are we promoting. But instead, no one will take this work away from you was the lesson my boss taught me on the first day of the job. And every day, we would just leave on time. And by the way, fast forward a few years, I had my first consulting gig in the Netherlands. It was a large bank. I won't mention the name. You know the name of the bank. And I was in the Netherlands. And this is the very first day, right? I'm naive. I had just gotten off the flight. I'm at work. And we were pair programming continuously on this work. So it was extremely intense. So we are sitting there and working. And I'm so razor focused on what I was doing. And suddenly, I cannot exaggerate this. Suddenly, I heard a rumble. And I'm looking up. And everybody is standing. And I sincerely thought, maybe these people do a stand-up meeting in the end of the day, right? So I'm like, why is everybody standing? So I stood up too. And then I saw this one guy reach for his coat. He puts on his jacket. And then within like 2 minutes, the entire room was empty with only me in there. I'm like, what just happened? Why did everybody leave? And this was like a very weird concept. It was an open area where we all were working. And then I look at my watch. It was 5:02. I'm like, oh, this concept that they actually go home. And I worked with them for 3 months. And every day, there'll be a little noise at 5 o'clock. And they all will get up and they would leave. The entire room is empty. I'm the lone guy. I can sit here, or I can sit in the hotel. And I don't watch TV, so I might as well sit here and do the work. And I was the lone guy at the office in the evenings because they actually went home. And I will guarantee you, we delivered better software and more software as well because people were extremely focused again. So I've seen evidence of this happen in more than once, and we can manage our time properly when we are motivated and we are not really there to, spend time, but to focus on the work. So focus on the result, you get a very different, solution than focusing on the time you are spending. Address problems, don't affix blames. This is another thing to really think about, is when things go wrong, what do we try to do? Are we trying to immediately say, let me tell you whose fault it was? Are we going to point fingers and say, you know what? He did this or she did this. But the problem is, when we try to put people on the spot, they're trying to be defensive. When things are not working, what do you want people to do at the moment? You want everyone to focus on how do we fix the problem? Because you have a customer waiting for a solution. And at this time, I would rather have people say, how can we solve the problem than let's find out who caused it. So this is an attitude, again, we can think about. I used to work in a team where when something went wrong, the manager would invite everybody for a meeting. So everybody organizes. And he would say, this went wrong in production, and I found out who caused it. And everybody is like, oh my gosh. And then he would say, I did. That was my problem. So who is going to help me to fix it? And all of a sudden, people are like, we don't want to talk about who caused it, because we clearly know the manager didn't do it, right? Because managers don't do anything. So the point really is, so you're like, who caused it? And he's like, I did it, right? And so the point really is, he's not interested in finding the person and let go, find that moron and, fire them, right? Instead, hey, it's my problem. I did it. But who's going to help me? And people are just jumping on the problem now and saying, I'm going to fix it. And of course, once it's over, the question is not who caused it, but what did we learn from this experience? So now we are focusing on what the problem was, not who the person was. So as a result, it completely changes your attitude in terms of what you're doing and what you're focusing on. So one of the key things to consider is this them versus us. This is, words we use make a difference. When you're saying they found this problem or they have a problem, now we have a them versus us. And we are trying to distance ourselves rather than saying we are in this together as a team. We are in this together as one organization that needs to work towards solving the problem for our clients, for our users. It makes a difference how we deal with things. So remove that them versus us attitude and think about the one team mentality. We are here together and it's a collective effort, and let's work towards that as a team rather than trying to point point fingers at each other can make a big difference as well. As a manager, again, you need to focus on facilitating change. Why is that? When was the last time things worked the way you wanted it to work? Almost never. You start something and then you're like, oh, that doesn't work. Let's find a different path to go through. Oh, that doesn't work. Let's find a different path to go through. You're making progress. You're moving forward. But every step you take, there's a hurdle. And for every step you take, there's a hurdle. And you find a workaround and keep moving forward. Pardon me. And that's something we have to do. So one of the key things I often think about is sustainability. Now, earlier I complained about the word Scrum Master. Let me complain one more time. Another word that makes absolutely no sense is the word velocity. I don't know who thought about it, but one of the stupidest things to do. Go faster. Like for what? And if you want me to go faster, guess what I'm going to show you that I'm going faster? I will drop quality. I will do easy things because easy things help me to go faster. If I do hard things, I'm going to be slow. If I put in quality, I'm going to be slow. So if you want speed from me, I'll give you speed. Until the speed matters, I cannot give it to you. So there are times when you have to slow down in order to gain speed. If I'm driving on the road is curving. If I don't slow down from 100 kilometers an hour down to maybe 70 kilometers an hour, what's going to happen? I'm going to end up in the ditch because there's not enough banking. I mean, I don't know. I've never driven a vehicle in India. I don't think I'm brave enough to ever do it. I admire people who can drive things here. I cannot do it. But I can tell you, of all the places in the world I've driven cars, there is one place that absolutely puzzles me. It's the street of Boston. Because I would drive my car in Boston and I'll fear for my life. I'm like, is this car going to hold up on the road? It took me a while and I kept asking, I drive through the country, not a problem. Why is it so hard to drive in Boston? And finally I figured this out. When you drive in Boston, the roads curve. That's it. They didn't understand this concept called banking. So when you're curving the road, you bank it. When you bank it, the centripetal force holds you in, but they did not know that there's a concept called banking. And then I realized the most prestigious universities are there. There's MIT and there's Harvard. Go figure, right? And this is the irony of the world. The best engineers are there. Oh, we don't need banking. We're way too smart for this, right? So the point is, you got to slow down in order to gain speed. And in Boston, when you slow down, if you don't slow down, you'll end up in the ditch. If you slow down, you get hit by the car behind you. You're going to die anyways on that street, right? So the point really is, you need to really think about sustainability. So sustainability is, how can you keep moving forward at a reasonable pace? And the answer to that is, there are times we have to slow down to bring in quality so we can go faster at that time. So if we want to keep moving forward and succeed, how can we really focus on success? So we need to rethink about what our goals are. The goal shouldn't be to go faster. So speed is not important. Sustainable speed is important. And succeeding on a project is more important than showing that we have been running faster. So it realigns our thoughts to what our motives are and why and where we are trying to go. So bring in the support I mentioned earlier. Bring in a coach into your team. If your developers are struggling with certain ideas, bring them support so that you can untangle them. If they're wasting the time, I had a company that called me up and said, hey, we want you to come and help our developers because they're struggling really hard. And they are wasting their time looking up on the internet. And I came in and said, hey, I'm here to work with you. And the team said, well, what would you do? I said, I'm your internal Google. That's what I am. So don't go searching for things. You don't know how to do something, ask me. I will tell you how to do it if I know it. Otherwise, I will do the searching and tell you so I can untangle you. My goal is for you to keep moving forward. while I can bring in the details you need to help you move forward. So bring the support for the team that can help them move forward. Plan how you're going to engage this support and then commit to that plan as a team and tell your team, I'm here to support you to move forward and succeed. Yes, we are going to have ups and downs, but that's fine. But we are not going to measure our velocity on a daily basis to say, oh, today you're slower. Yeah, I'm slower because we're learning these new things. Or we're slower because we're trying to figure out how to really apply these new libraries and tools. So we need to really slow down when we have to. One of the key things to also ask is, don't ask for agreement, ask for alignment. Agreement is incredibly difficult. Those of us who are married knows this. Who agrees with their spouse? Raise your hand if you do. The last time I asked this question, one guy was immediate. He was a lone guy in the room. He's like, I do. I'm like, really? He said, absolutely. I said, how long have you been married? He said, 1 week. I said, yeah, brother, I understand that. We'll check back with you in a few weeks, right? It's incredibly hard to agree with somebody else. Each of us have our own opinions, our own ideas. Now imagine if two people cannot agree, you're expecting a team to agree. How unnatural that is, right? So if you say, do we all agree? If they raise the hand, they're called liars, right? We don't agree, right? So don't ask for agreement, ask for alignment. I don't care to get your agreement, but I want you to be aligned to where we want to go. You don't have to agree with every detail, but we need to align. This is our goal, and I want to know where we are heading. And if you can align yourselves to the business goals, you're going to make decisions that may be different from the decisions I make. That's okay. Your decisions don't have to be the same as mine, but we're going to meet over there. That's what we are really after. I don't care about the path you take, because your path may be easier for you. Mine may be easier for me. But as long as we can meet over there, and can we have the alignment? So as for alignment, prefer alignment over agreement. So rather than asking people to endlessly argue about how things should be done, instead just from time to time say, what is our goal? And you'd be surprised. When you start a meeting asking that question, what are we here for? It resets our mind. We let the baggage out. And then we say, this is what we are focused on. Good, we are aligned on what our focus is. Now let's talk about how we can get there. So focus on that alignment. So agreement is a tall order, requires synchronizing everybody, requires conformance, which is incredibly hard to achieve in general. But instead, I would say, focus on how we can work together. Focus on why and where we are heading. And if we can ask that question and remind ourselves why we are here, what our focus is, we tend to really realign ourselves and then work together. So it feels like we're all moving in the same direction. It doesn't matter what pace we are moving at, as long as we can get there to achieve the goals we want to achieve. The next thing I want to say is something I want to absolutely emphasize. Please don't play politics. This is the most detrimental thing I see in companies. Every time I see somebody play politics, they lost my respect. If my manager plays politics in front of me, that's not good for me. Because the manager is interested in their ego. They are sitting there arguing. That person is no good. They shouldn't be doing this. I don't like him or her being this position. And I sit there and say, excuse me, I just want to do my work. I want to go home. I don't care about your problems. I already have my problems to deal with. And the last thing I want is your problems, right? So when somebody talks politics to me, they lose my respect. Because company politics doesn't progress anybody. And instead you say, you know what? Raise your hand if you're perfect. That's exactly the question I often ask. Nobody is perfect. We can always see other people's flaw, but we very rarely see our own. Everybody complains about everybody. And the point is, nobody's going to be perfect, ever. So why focus on what we cannot be? Instead, let's focus on what we can accomplish together. So a better team is a team that focuses on the outcome than politics. I joined one team, and they would look at me and say, hey, Venkat, don't tell me who did what, because there's nothing I can do to fix that. But tell me what you want to accomplish, I'll show you how to get there. This completely changed the conversation in the teams. We never focused on, let's talk about the person. Was it Eleanor Roosevelt? She said, feeble minds talk about people. Great minds talk about ideas. I don't want to talk about a person. I want to talk about an idea. Because what can we do to accomplish rather than who did what? So politics doesn't help us. So don't play politics. Many employees simply don't care about who is right. I don't care about which manager is right. That's not my focus. They want to get the work done and they want to go home. And they genuinely want to focus on their work and they want to succeed. So when you drag people into politics, they're not listening because they agree with you. They're listening because they're too scared to tell you that you are broken. And that is the reality most of the time. When I started growing up in my field, when I was able to say that I can get fired, I can find another job, I would tell my bosses, I'm really sorry, this doesn't help me. I know you have problems, but it doesn't help me having those problems, hearing about those problems. Let's focus on how we can accomplish results. And that becomes really contagious. Both of them are contagious. Good habits are contagious, bad habits are contagious. But when you start promoting good habits, and when you, in your conversation, you time and again, be polite to them. They start whining about something. You say, you know what, I hear you, but I want to talk about this particular accuracy problem we are having in this code. And keep doing that for about the next 15 minutes. They get the message that you don't care about politics. You want to talk about the problem in the code or the software that you're building. So politics costs morale in teams. It costs you trust. I'm not going to be freely talking to you when you deal with politics because it's walking on eggshell. If I say something, what if you go tell this other person I said this, right? So now we are very calculated what we say. Affects morale, affects trust. It costs respect, and it takes away focus from you. It jeopardizes your productivity as a team as well. So quit playing politics. So leave the politics to others and focus on the outcome you can achieve as a team. Then I think we can achieve better results. The third quality I want to talk about here is truly care about quality. Quality is something that goes by the wayside oftentimes when we don't really take the time to emphasize it. But quality is extremely hard to bring in once we have lost it. Now, I'm not going to say quality is needed at the same level for everything. People would ask me, should I care about quality? My answer is not yes or no. My question to them is, what's the cost of failure? Seriously, what's your cost of failure? If my cost of failure is small, I don't have to worry about quality as much. If my cost of failure is high, I should care about quality. I'll give you an example of this. A company in London called me, and I live in Denver, so it's about 4 a.m. my time. So I'm on the phone at 4 a.m., and the manager there says, hey, Venkat, I got your name and reference. I want you to come and do training on test-driven development. I said, why do you want me to come and do training on test-driven development? The obvious answer is like, dude, I'm hiring you. Don't you want to get paid, right? So my question is, why do you want me to do a test-driven development? He said, because I want people to have good quality. I said, why do you care about quality? He's like, I feel like I'm being interviewed right now. I called you to come and do the work, right? And he said, because I want my team to develop better software. I said, help me out here, please. How much money are you spending because of poor quality of code? Oh, I can give you that number right away. It's $1 million per year. I said, $1 million per year. Oh, yeah. I said, with all respect, when I'm walking on the street, if I open my wallet and $1 flies away, I say this with respect, I'm not going to run behind $1 and catch it, because the value of $1 in my life is very little today. $1 for me is $1 million for your company. You're a multi-billion-dollar company. So you dropped 1 million, and worrying about it is like me dropping $1 and running behind it. Don't change anything. He's like, well, you almost convinced me. Let me tell you the real reason I called you. I'm like, yes. Apparently, his CEO was giving a talk in a conference, and a guy from the Department of Justice served a notice to him because he had completely messed up and wiped out the U.S. Department of Defense's software. So he's like, we're in a lawsuit right now. We need to fix it. So the cost there was not money. The cost was reputation. So we need to really understand why we want to care about quality. And then we take actions very differently. It's incredibly hard to catch up at a later time. Quality is kind of like health. You cannot just live ruthlessly as a young person and say, when I'm 65, I'll catch up. Sorry, you don't have that luxury. 65 is when you complain or you enjoy good health, too late to catch up. Quality is like that. You can build into it or you lost it. So the deterioration is exponential oftentimes and becomes almost impossible to recover if we don't spend the time focusing on it. So this is one of the concerns I truly have. A generation of developers may have grown to ignore quality, partly due to their business environments, but the biggest concern to me is the lack of their skills that they have failed to develop to care for quality, even when placed in a situation that facilitates or necessitates high quality. I was talking to a developer in Minneapolis. He told me, we spent 10 years developing software with no quality at all. I kind of said, yeah, I've seen that a lot. And then he said, after 10 years, we started a greenfield project 3 years ago. I'm like, wow. And then he paused. And then he said, 3 years ago, we started a greenfield project, but we never learned to write any quality code. We don't even know what quality is. So at the end of 3 years, we have a new 3-year-old legacy application. How sad that is. If we don't ever learn to build quality, we never get a sense of what that really means. That becomes incredibly hard. And that's a problem I see. We don't even know what quality is because we never had a chance to build quality. And so it's not about what you do now. It's about what you can ever do because it's a skill you need to take time to develop. So it's not about what we do now, but what we can ever do. So build the team that is aligned with your quality goals and strive towards making that happen because that becomes extremely important. As a manager, stay technical. I know this is really hard. But stay technical as a technical manager because your people are dealing with technology all the time. And when they talk about things, you must be able to understand what they are talking about. Better be able to assess the risk, to schedule estimates and keep an eye on the quality. If you don't understand what these things are, you're trusting the team to do anything. Trust is good, but you got to be able to verify that as well. And the last thing I'll mention is ask and understand why. I'll share with you one example as a final example. I was down in a company and they told me they want to completely change their back end. They told me they want to use a technology and they said, you know this technology, that's why we invited you, we want to learn it from you. I said, I'll be happy to, but I have a question for you. Why do you want to change the back end? And the answer I got was, because we hate it. I said, that's good. When you're done changing it, it's going to cost you maybe a year or two, a few $1 million to do. When you're done changing it, how does it affect your users? Their response was, what do you mean by that? I said, how does it help your company in terms of revenue? What do you mean by that? I said, you're going to spend all this time and you're going to make the change. And when you're done, it has zero impact on your users. It has zero impact on your business. And you want to change it because you hate it. How does that feel? And they are like, gosh, you're asking these questions. They went and got their director. He came and said, what are you asking? I said, this is the question I wanted to ask. He looked at me and said, it's funny, nobody ever asked this question ever before. Does anyone know the answer? And they're like, yeah, we all hate this. That's all we know. And he looked at me and said, sorry, we don't need you anymore. You can go home. And the next morning, he sends me an email. Seriously. He sends me an email. And this is the email I got from him. It's easy to get so close to a problem or have been working with the stuff so long that you can lose the perspective on what the real goals and the issues might be. This was the email from him. I've saved it on my disk so I can write a book about it one day. But that was a true email. I just copied and pasted, just removed his name from it. But he had the courage to write that email. And that's exactly what he said. You're too close to a problem sometimes. You fail to ask, why are we doing it? We don't even know the goals as to why we are moving towards that. So trust but verify. Ask the team to justify decisions. That is extremely important. So to summarize what we talked about, be adaptive, not reactive. Use carrots instead of sticks. Match positions with personality. Focus on results, not presence. Work smart, not long and hard. Address problems, don't affix blames. Facilitate change. Prefer alignment over agreement. Don't play politics. Truly care about quality. Stay technical and ask why and understand it. Hope that was useful. Thank you so much.